You know, people seldom go to the trouble of scratching the surface of things to find the inner truth.
You're here because you know something, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
Truth is stranger than lies. From deep inside the rabbit hole, here's your host, David Weiss.
And I'm Patricia Steere. Welcome to Truth is Stranger Than Lies. David, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. We have a special guest with us.
Yes, his newest book is The War on Women. He is, among many things, a lobbyist, a staffer in the Senate and House. He's got other books on the Clinton and Bush crime families, and he is a former advisor to current presidential candidate Donald Trump, who did not fire him. There's more to the story than maybe you have read. Let's welcome Roger Stone. Roger, thank you for being here on Truth is Stranger Than Lies.
I'm delighted to be with you.
Roger, we're going to get into some amazing stuff. I had the privilege of listening in on an interview earlier today, and some of the stuff that you're talking about is simply mind-blowing, and if you're not sitting down and you're hearing it for the first time, you will be sitting down. But I have one question I want to jump forward and just ask you. How are you still alive?
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? You know, I actually think that there's very little danger in writing about the Kennedy and Johnson era. I wrote a New York Times best-selling book, which makes the case, I think a compelling case, using fingerprint evidence, eyewitness evidence, deep Texas politics, to make the case that Lyndon Baines Johnson was the linchpin of a plot to murder John Kennedy. He was certainly the single greatest beneficiary of that crime. And while I absolutely guarantee you that the Central Intelligence Agency, the mob, Big Texas Oil, they all played their part. They were all involved. Johnson is the one indispensable party. So when I wrote that book, I kind of expected an enormous amount of blowback from the Johnson retainers and the Johnson family lawyers and some of his political aficionados. And you know what I got? Crickets. Most of those people are dead. Now, taking on Bill and Hillary Clinton and the Bush dynasty, as I have in my current book, The Clintons' War on Women, which is an unvarnished, sordid, true story of serial sexual assault and rape, intimidation, cover-up, witness tampering, physical violence against witnesses, drugs, both drug use and drug trafficking, lies, cover-up. Yes, I have had some death threats. Yes, I have worn a vest, a bulletproof vest, to some of my book signings. On the other hand, I kind of believe that the higher my profile is, the better off it is for me. So let me say it just right now. In a few weeks, if they tell you I was depressed and I committed suicide, or if they tell you I was killed in a tragic hunting accident, or if I got hit by a bus crossing the street, it's all a lie. I was murdered, and Hillary Clinton is the chief suspect.
Wow. So the Clinton death list, if anyone looks that up, you give that total validity?
Well, you know, I think there's some overstatement there. There is at least one website that claims that the Clintons are responsible for up to 83 individual deaths with the goal of covering their trail of crimes. I can't find any more than 63
Just
of
63.
the 83 that they are truly connected
So
to.
it's only 63, so that's okay then.
Well, we can talk about specifics. I think the most obvious one is this fellow, Jerry Parks. Jerry Parks was hired as a private investigator. His job was to keep a thumb on numerous women who could be problems in Clinton's comeback campaign for governor. Clinton won. Parks presented his bill for $83,000. Bill Clinton laughed at him and said, well, the election's over, Jerry. I won. You're not getting paid. Jerry therefore threatened to go public with a lot of things he knew about Bill and women and drugs. And about 3 miles from his home, somebody drove Jerry off the side of the road and put 3 slugs in his head.
Suicide?
So motive means opportunity. Do I have proof? No, I have no proof.
Right.
But who else logically wanted Jerry Parks dead?
With your book, The Clintons' War on Women, many people have through the years heard about Bill Clinton and his womanizing ways and heard him lie straight to the American public. But Hillary, you find her complicit in all of this as well, not just in looking the other way, but blatantly covering things up. Tell us a little bit more about Hillary Clinton and how much danger are we in that she's going to be our president?
Well, first of all, I want to make a very specific distinction between consensual sex and sexual assault. My book is not about Bill's affairs, mistresses, girlfriends, conquests, one-night stands. If I wrote such a book, it would have to be an encyclopedia. Literally, I think it would number in the thousands, because Bill Clinton is a sex addict, and this is why former President Gerald Ford told him to his face that he needed psychiatric help for that problem. My book is about something far darker, and that is a serial trail of sexual assault and rape. Juanita Broaddrick, Kathleen Willey, Paula Corbin Jones are the best known of these, but Sandra Allen James, Liz Ward Grayson, Becky Brown, Helen Dowdy, Eileen Wellstone. This list goes on and on and on. And yes, not only has Bill perpetrated these crimes against women, either sexual assault and exposing himself, demanding oral sex, or in the case of Broaddrick and Grayson and others, outright rape, but Hillary Clinton has been the point person for the cover-up. It has been Hillary who first, from her East Wing office, has sought to discredit and degrade and assault these women, bimbos, sluts, whores, trash, as if it's their fault that they got sexually assaulted by her husband. And then it's also Hillary who has hired the heavy-handed private detectives, Jack Palladino, Anthony Pellicano, Ivan Duda, Jerry Parks, to keep tabs on those women who would be problematic for the Clintons if they came forward and talked about what Bill had done. So she's a full partner in the cover-up. She is the one who's directed the veritable terror campaign to silence Bill's victims unless they get in the way of their reach for power and wealth and elective office.
Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton, if either of them are who's running against each other, it's pretty much the exact same crime family in the end who's going to win. But do you think that we need to worry about or consider that Hillary may be our future president?
It's certainly a legitimate concern. Look, a Hillary Clinton-Jeb Bush election would be a heads I win, tails you lose election. Their policies are identical. Endless war, erosion of our civil liberties, massing borrowing and debt being passed on to our great-grandchildren now, incredible increases in federal spending, a foreign policy that has systematically turned over every country in the Middle East to our enemies. They are exactly the same in every way. This is really why I was once a very proud and sentimental Republican, an aide to 3 Republican presidents. I'm a former Young Republican National Chairman. You know, I love the old Republican Party of Barry Goldwater, the party of small government, stay out of my bedroom, stay out of my business, stay out of my life. That Republican Party doesn't exist anymore. Both parties have morphed into one party. It's the endless war party. It is very sad, but although the Mitt Romneys and the Barack Obamas endeavor to try to sound different, it's a kabuki dance. It's all false. The policies remain exactly the same. Remember, Barack Obama was going to close Guantanamo, still open. He was going to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. Now we're talking about sending troops to Syria. Nothing ever really changes. Hillary Clinton is, at this point, probably the favorite to become president of the United States. But I would argue that because her campaign strategy is solely built on winning a disproportional number of votes from women, when women learn that she is an abuser of women, that while her husband has abused them physically, Hillary has abused them psychologically, I think the bottom falls out of that strategy, and therefore she has built her entire campaign structure on quicksand.
I mean, do you think the American people have the mental capacity to realize this? I mean, the Clinton crime family has been bringing in huge quantities of drugs, along with the Bush crime family. They're Bill is a sexual predator, that puts Cosby to shame, and still everyone, bows to them, pays him millions of dollars to speak, and Hillary's our front runner. How is this possible?
Because most people don't know that everything you just said is true, because to date, we have counted on the mainstream media to tell us what is going on, and therefore the Clintons have gotten a certain immunity, as have the Bushes. Here's the great equalizer. This is going to be the first election in which the internet is in full and complete play. And therefore, suppressing information, which was really easy back in the days when you only had 3 networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC. If it didn't happen there, it just didn't happen at all. That's no longer possible. So I believe, as Jefferson did, in the American people. And when the American people have all the facts, they make good decisions. They only make bad decisions when they don't know all the facts. And it's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, or really both of these books. People need to know this. They can make their own judgment. All of my books are very carefully sourced and footnoted. Believe me, when you write a book like this, the lawyers for your publishers put you through the ringer. The $800,000 an hour lawyers who are experts in libel, believe me, they went through every sentence, every period, every comma, and I'm happy to say nothing has come out of either one of these books.
Thank you very much for talking with us today, Roger. You're a wealth of information, and we've got, so many other questions to talk with you about. We probably need to talk about Cruz and, of course, Trump. A lot to do with Trump in the news, and you supposedly being fired, according to Trump, because, well, that's his signature thing, firing everybody. But you've got a different take on that. And we have about a minute before we go to a break, and maybe when we come back from the break, we can touch on that more. But David, what would you
I have lots of
ask?
questions about Trump. I know that you're getting bombarded, but I'd be curious to hear your views on Trump's opinion on what happened on 9/11 and other big events that are shaping our world today. So we're coming up on a break right now after these important messages. Hopefully they're important and they're not some silly ad. And we will be right back with Truth is Stranger Than Lies on Talk Network.
I like that. Check it out.
And welcome back to Truth is Stranger Than Lies. It's David Weiss and Patricia Steere, and we are talking with Roger Stone. And Roger used to be a Republican and now is a libertarian, but you were saying when we were talking off mic that you don't even know how long that's going to last.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have great sentimental attachment to the Republican Party, and therefore, like Teddy Roosevelt, who left the party and returned, like Ron Paul, who left the party and returned, I could return to become a Republican if I thought there was a fight worth having in the Republican Party. I am now past the legal date in which I could switch and vote in the Florida primary for Donald Trump. If I could do that legally, I would. I do think that I'm enjoying immensely the way Trump is upending the political order. All the old rules seem to be out the window. All the conventional wisdom that said, oh, first of all, he's never really going to run. This is a publicity stunt. It's all about his brand. Let me tell you, I have been trying to get Trump to run for president since 1988, when I arranged for him to go to the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Chamber of Commerce for their luncheon, and 2,000 plus people showed up. I tried to get him run in 2000 as the Reform Party candidate because the Reform Party of Ross Perot was then entitled to $25 million for the general election from the federal treasury. And he did look at it seriously, but the time was really not right in terms of his own life and his business. He was single at the time. He had just gotten divorced from Ivana. And then 3 years ago, I wanted him to run against Mitt Romney. I thought he would have been a stronger candidate than Romney. I still believe that. So we have a long friendship and a long association. I very strongly support him, despite the fact that we have some disagreements. And I have been very, very vocal today and in the last couple months in the media about why I support it.
Do you think he actually has a chance to be selected, or is he just put in there to steal votes and push Hillary into the White House?
He's most definitely not a shill for Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
He very definitely has a chance to be nominated, and then I think it would be a very tough but competitive fight in the general election. Look, he has already confounded all of his critics who said he's not really running. Then they said he would never file his financial disclosures. He filed those. He's worth $10 billion. Then they said he would fall flat in his face in all the debates. After every debate, his poll numbers have gone up. Then he's made a series of audacious comments that everyone said would blow him out of the race. That hasn't happened either. So at this point, he is very definitely the serious front runner. Now, he may be like Berlusconi in Italy, but Berlusconi was elected and reelected and elected again. So, yes, he could very well be the Republican nominee, and he could be the president.
Roger, you have made comments and claims that you feel that the Paris attacks and the San Bernardino attacks were all created, or excuse me, have created a perfect storm for Trump to be elected. Do you believe that? Can you elaborate on that? And have you thought about the fact that both of those events may have actually been completely staged events and didn't happen naturally?
Yeah, I don't think that they're staged events. I think they are the work of radical Islamic terrorists. I do think very much like the attack on 9/11, which created the perfect storm that elected Michael Bloomberg, a Republican mayor of New York City, the most democratic city in the United States, even more so than Chicago. Yes, you could have a perfect storm here in which drastic times call for drastic temporary measures. And therefore, San Bernardino plus Paris means that you could get majority support for a temporary ban on Muslim immigration, at least until such time that we have a mechanism in place to sort out the good people from the bad people. I have no doubt that many, probably a majority of the Muslims who would like to come to this country are law-abiding, peaceful, decent people. But given that one of those who perpetrated the mass murders in Paris entered that country through the immigration system, I think it's wise for us to be vigilant. Now, I know the political class has gone completely crazy today. They are wetting their pants over this, and it's supposed to be the end of Trump, an enormous mistake. Let's see what the polls show in a week. I would propose to you, I would suggest that he will increase his lead.
You know, he's running against Jeb and Hillary. That's not a fair race. I mean, who wouldn't like Trump over them? I mean, if you know about the Clintons and the Bushes, I would vote for anybody over them.
But there's a giant if. The voters don't have as much information as you and I.
Sure.
I think the Republican nominee will be one of three people. It'll either be Donald Trump, or it'll be Senator Ted Cruz, or it'll be Senator Marco Rubio. You cannot put air into a popped balloon again. The Jeb Bush candidacy is over. And I think there was a sense of entitlement there. He was just going to roll in with $100 million of dirty Wall Street money that he raised. And that was going to be shock and awe. All these other candidates were going to fall by the wayside. Chris Christie would drop out, and John Kasich wouldn't run, and everybody's going to roll over for Jeb. And of course, none of that has happened. Plus, his performance on the stump has been less than riveting, shall we say.
So I want to just jump back a little bit to Trump's views. And Patricia brought up that asked you about Paris and San Bernardino, asked what you thought, what really happened there. Our views are a little different than yours, but there's other big events that have happened that are clearly not what we've been told, such as 9/11, Sandy Hook and the Boston bombing. But just let's stick on New York for 9/11. I'm curious on what your view is. Was that hijacked airplanes? And if you could tell us what Donald Trump thinks about those events.
The answer, as far as my own thinking, is I don't know. I will certainly admit there are many, many curious questions to which I have not seen reasonable answers. One thing is absolutely clear, though, and that is Trump was right 3 weeks ago when he said that George W. Bush did not keep us safe. And there was a terrific piece in Politico magazine in which 2 former CIA directors admit that we had multiple warnings of men being trained to fly planes into buildings, and that there was nobody connecting the dots. There was no follow-up on that for whatever reason. So my next book is not going to be about 9/11. My next book is going to focus on what I believe was the murder of John F. Kennedy Jr., who was warming up for a U.S. Senate race in New York State, who had begun meeting with New York Democrats, telling them that he was running. At the same time, Hillary Clinton decided that she wanted that seat. And there's a number of things about that plane crash that we've been told by the mainstream media that are not true, including his inexperience as a pilot. He was a far more experienced pilot than we've been told. So that's really the focus of my next book. After that, I'm going to try to turn to the 9/11 question.
Wasn't it concealed that he did actually have a flight instructor on the plane, and that was hidden from us during the rescue, and the rescue was delayed so they could take the log out of the bag that was in the plane? Have you heard about that?
I have, and this will be covered in my book. And there's a number of anomalies here. First of all, Kennedy Jr., John, has far more hours as a pilot than we've been told, and thousands of hours on a simulator, learning to fly without instrumentation, solely on instrumentation. And there's a great delay in the search for him. It is not until his uncle, Ted Kennedy, gets Bill Clinton out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning with a phone call and says, "What is going on here?" that Clinton says, "Yeah, we'll get right on it." There's at least 2 witnesses who see an explosion, a fireball in the sky, and see the plane drop down. Those witnesses have both disappeared. One of them worked for the FAA. One of them was a newspaper reporter. When you go to the newspaper where this fellow worked, they say they've never heard of him. And then when you show them his byline in their printed material, they say, "Oh, he was a freelancer. He came and went." I think there's a lot more to this story. Stay tuned.
And there's even more to the story with his wife, model Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, supposedly was just about ready to leave JFK for a fellow model. So there's conspiracy layers and conspiracy layers and conspiracy layers in this whole story. And the whole Kennedy family has fascinated us for decades and will continue to do so. So we look forward to that coming out. What about Cruz? What about Ted Cruz? You touched on him briefly. What are your thoughts?
He's running a very smart campaign. He's extremely disciplined. He's obviously very highly intelligent. I think he's the single best debater in the Republican Party. He is very wise in terms of conserving his resources until it matters. He's got a great policy in his campaign in which nobody who works on his campaign can double dip, taking payments from vendors for direct mail or telephone calls or TV commercials. When you go to work for Ted Cruz, you take a vow of poverty. Most of his key staffers have moved to Texas with their families. I think that speaks great of the dedication of his core team. He's got highly capable people working for him. He has a very clear idea of who his constituency is in the party, and he's been slowly and methodically corralling them. Again, I think one of the 3 people will be the nominee, and Ted Cruz is one of the 3.
If you had to vote today, who would you vote for?
I would vote for Donald Trump. He's been my friend of 37 years. I have enormous affection for him. I went to the funerals and wakes for both of his parents. He came to my father's funeral, pardon me. He was there when I got married. I have great affection for his sister, who's a very respected federal judge in New Jersey, a position I helped her get in the Reagan administration. Look, I love Donald Trump. We don't agree on everything. For example, I think the war on drugs is a massive, expensive failure. Trump is a supporter of the war on drugs. So we have some fundamental disagreements, but I'd vote for Donald Trump today.
We'll be back with Roger Stone shortly. We're talking about many things involving politics, and we're talking about the Kennedys and the Clintons and the Bushes and, well, pretty much everything that's going on in the political world today. You're listening to Truth is Stranger Than Lies. It's David Weiss and I, and we will be back with Roger Stone as we continue here on Talk Network. Welcome back to Truth is Stranger Than Lies on Talk Network. It's Patricia Steere and David Weiss, and our guest is Roger Stone. He's the author of several different books. We can't mention them all, but he's got Nixon's Secrets, The Rise, Fall, and the Untold Truth, and The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. And the one we're talking about today, the most recent one, is The Clintons' War on Women. And that book on Amazon was attacked with many one-star reviews, but they were... I don't know, we call them trolls. They were not real reviews by real people. And Roger, you and your people eventually got some of those unfair reviews taken down. Tell us about that story.
Yeah, there was a sequence of events. Politico wrote a story in which they got the entrance code for a Hillary Clinton finance conference call. And therefore, a reporter dialed in to listen to the call. And during that call, the Clinton press secretary was asked very specifically about my book. And they said, yes, we're aware that this is coming out. We have a task force put together. We will immediately take the book and we'll rip it apart, and then we will discredit Stone. So that was reported. Then shortly thereafter, the book published. I was on with Sean Hannity. I think the next day I was on with Fox and Friends. And almost immediately, we had a disproportionate number of one-star reviews, and they were also one-sentence reviews, as in, this book is a piece of crap, Stone's a lunatic, and so on. And having some resources of my own, we were able to do a little bit of reconnaissance, and we were able to trace virtually all of these reviews to an IP address that it was at the Hillary Clinton headquarters in Brooklyn. There were others that was an IP address at Media Matters, which is a pro-Clinton front funded by George Soros in Washington, D.C. And to their credit, the folks at Amazon, after our attorneys contacted them, took a number of these fake reviews down. They now have a very firm policy at Amazon against organized or paid or fake reviews, either extolling or damning a book. And last time I looked, we were #1 in political categories on Amazon. The book is selling very well despite the mainstream media blackout. I know you're not going to believe this, but the New York Times in their book supplement just this past weekend printed the 100 most notable books of 2015, and incredibly, my book was not on the list.
Even though it was #1.
#1 on Amazon. So, look, my book is never going to be reviewed by the New York Times or the Washington Post, and that's just something I'm going to have to live with.
And now you mentioned that it's selling well in other countries.
Well, I have gotten really great press coverage abroad. I can't complain about the coverage in this country, in all honesty.
Okay.
I've gotten plenty of coverage for the book. The book remains controversial, and controversy sells books, as you know. But right after the book was published, the 3 largest television networks in Russia sent reporters to where I was in New Orleans, 3 different reporters, 3 different crews for multi-hour interviews on the book. Now, I saw those broadcasts. I didn't understand them because I don't understand Russian, but they put the packages together with a lot of backstory and visuals and so on. So we've come to a point where the press in Russia is more free and open than the press in the United States, because CNN, for whom I've done a lot of political commentary over the years, when I've asked them to talk about this book, what I've gotten back was crickets.
Let's talk a bit about Jennifer Flowers, Bill Clinton's longtime mistress. She's back. She says she's got a bunch of secrets to reveal. What's your take on that, Roger Stone?
Well, she's written a terrific book that already tells us 3 interesting things. I have written in my book extensively about what I consider the very strange relationship between Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin, her right-hand woman, chief of staff, chic, exotic, beautiful, and I believe a Muslim Brotherhood spy, based on her family connections and her early involvement with hate groups that were identified with radical Islam. Now, a number of reporters have said to me, are you claiming that Hillary is a lesbian? The answer is no, I am not claiming that. Bill Clinton has claimed that. According to Jennifer Flowers, Bill said, I'll clean this up a little bit, that Hillary has been with more women than she has, or than he has, pardon me. The other thing that Jennifer Flowers tells us in our book, which is even more chilling, is that after the Clinton-Flowers relation became public, just before the 1992 Democratic primary in New Hampshire, Bill and Hillary went on 60 Minutes in a famous broadcast, which was carefully edited by Don Hewitt to make it as sympathetic and as exonerating for Bill as possible. And within that interview, Bill said he'd only been with Flowers one time. Well, there was a fellow who lived across the hall in the apartment complex where Jennifer Flowers lives, a fellow named Gary Johnson, an attorney. He had set up a security camera, not because he was interested in Bill and Jennifer, but because his car was being vandalized. But unfortunately for him, what he got was a videotape of Bill coming and going many, many more times than he said on CBS. Then one day, 3 Arkansas state troopers showed up at his apartment late at night. They beat him so badly they left him for dead. They totally crushed his nasal cavities, dislocated his elbows, his shoulders, lacerated his spleen, his liver, his kidneys, and left him in a bloody mess. One of the neighbors we interviewed said you could hear men shouting, "Where is the fucking video? Where is the video?" These are the tactics of Bill and Hillary Clinton. They include physical violence against witnesses.
Did that video ever surface?
No one has ever found the video. Johnson says when interviewed that the video was taken. This is depicted in Jennifer Flowers' book. It's also extensively depicted in mine. Gary Johnson has never physically or psychologically recovered from the near-death beating he took at the hands of Bill Clinton's goons.
Jennifer Flowers also hints that she's got some other information, some bombshell information that the Clintons know that she has on them. And so who knows when or if that is going to come out. And I
believe what that is the fact that Bill paid for an abortion for Jennifer. Now, Bill has, through the years, when it suited him, he's told some women that he's sterile, meaning, don't worry, you can't get pregnant if we have sex because I'm sterile. He's not sterile. In fact, he is the father of Danny Williams. Danny Williams is the abandoned, rejected, mixed-race son of Bill Clinton and Bobby Ann Williams, who was a coke addicted prostitute in Little Rock, Arkansas. So Hillary Clinton tells us Black Lives Matter, unless, of course, you're Danny Williams. Danny Williams is, you can see him on Twitter, Danny, D-A-N-N-E-Y, Williams, also on Facebook. First of all, he looks exactly like his father. Secondarily, when his mother, Bobby Ann Williams, now deceased, and his aunt, Lucille Bolton, took him to the governor's mansion as a child demanding to see Hillary because they wanted them to do the right thing and support their son, Hillary had them turned away. And the next day, Danny Williams told me he was threatened. An Arkansas state trooper showed up at the shack where they lived and told he and his mother if they ever went anywhere near the Clintons again, they would be thrown in jail for the rest of their lives. Now, Danny's first came to public prominence after the Clintons refused to acknowledge who he was. A local civil rights activist in Little Rock, Robert Say McIntosh, issued a statement demanding that Clinton take responsibility for his son and demanding a blood test. And after McIntosh's son, who was in the Arkansas State Penitentiary and ineligible for pardon or parole, got a full pardon 15 years before he was eligible, McIntosh went silent.
Let's talk a little bit about cocaine and Bill Clinton. It's something that you spoke of before, and since you were just speaking of Danny and Danny's background, many people have said he likes to party, he likes to have fun, but you feel it's deeper than that.
Yeah, I think there's no question about Bill's personal cocaine use. I think we document that in the book. I also think that he has gone into drug rehab a couple times. We document that in the book. But there is no question that after the Congress cut off funding for the Nicaraguan rebels, that the Central Intelligence Agency under Vice President George Bush and a special task force ran hundreds of millions of dollars worth of cocaine into the United States to be sold in the country's urban areas to raise money to illegally finance the Nicaraguan rebels. At first, they imported this cocaine into Louisiana, But the problem was the governor of Louisiana and the Louisiana State Police knew a crime when they saw one, and they would not cooperate. Then they tried to do it in Texas, where they had the same result. Ultimately, they found a friendly governor who was willing to take his cut and had the state police look the other way. That was Bill Clinton. So George Bush, vice president then, and Bill Clinton were in business together in the cocaine trafficking business. Dan Lasseter, who was a financier of Clinton's career, one of his closest friends, was the largest financial beneficiary of this cocaine trafficking operation. He would ultimately become convicted on a minor drug offense, but he went out and got himself a really, really smart woman lawyer by the name of Hillary Clinton, and she convinced the governor to give Lasseter a full pardon.
We're talking with Roger Stone, and this is Truth is Stranger Than Lies. His newest book is The Clintons, The War on Women, and he has other books talking about the Clinton and Bush crime families and JFK. And you also are on Twitter. Do you spend a lot of time on Twitter?
I love Twitter. Twitter's like owning a newspaper without the debt. Plus, I can express myself easily in 140 characters. I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
What is your Twitter handle?
I am Roger J. Stone Jr., Jr., Roger J. Stone Jr. I love Twitter. Facebook is kind of more long form, but don't underestimate the incredible power of both of these tools. I don't think my books would have gotten the kind of coverage they've gotten, nor do I think they would have sold as well as they have without both Twitter and Facebook, and to a certain degree, Instagram.
Okay.
Do you ever get threats of any sort? We talked earlier. David was joking about, you're lucky that no one's come after you and that you're not dead. But do you receive threats via Twitter, via any social media?
I don't get them through social media. I've gotten them in the mail. I've gotten them by phone. I've turned them over to the local police, which is what you're supposed to do. I have, for some of my public appearances and book signings, I've had additional security that I paid for out of my own pocket. They urged me not to talk about that. Yes, it's a legitimate concern. On the other hand, as I said at the beginning of the program, if something happens to me, you'll know who's guilty.
Well, we might want to talk when we come back from our break a little bit about Gaddafi, a little bit about some other things that you may be working on or other thoughts that you may have about Trump, about his assertions that you were fired and you saying no, that you stepped back. And I don't know, we probably could get into a few other things as well. This show is called Truth is Stranger Than Lies because indeed it is. It's David Weiss from Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole, and I'm Patricia Steere, and my YouTube channel is Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. So we want you to join us on those aspects of our lives, as well as continue listening to this show here. All right, Roger Stone back in a moment on Truth is Stranger Than Lies on Talk Network. Welcome back to Truth is Stranger Than Lies on Talk Network. It's Patricia Steere, David Weiss, and our special guest, Roger Stone. And we've been talking about his book, The Clintons' War on Women, and other books he has written. We want to go back to Trump because you were involved with Trump and advisor to him. You are no more, and Trump has said that he fired you, and you say you stepped down. Let's talk about the circumstances involving that, Roger.
Yeah, I very definitely resigned because I wasn't born yesterday. I shared my resignation letter and my decision to resign with at least 5 sources who confirmed that for the New York Times and also for Politico. It's interesting that a Trump spokesman said that I was fired. Trump himself never said that, although I'm sure it was said in the heat of the moment. I most definitely resigned, which has not changed my strong support for Donald Trump or our friendship. I talk to him from time to time, and I've been very vocal on his behalf. I'll tell you why I support him, despite the fact that we disagree on some issues. Having been a lobbyist, having worked in the Senate, having worked in the House, having worked in Washington, I have seen how broken our system is. It's a cesspool. Anything can be purchased with the right amount of money and the right lobbyists and the right connections. So I do think the most attractive thing about Trump is that he is so wealthy that you can't buy him. He's not beholden to any special interest or lobbyist or corporation or billionaire or super PAC. He has his own money. He is his own man. And therefore, I think we might finally have a president who actually works for the American people as opposed to working for some secret special interest, whether it's George Soros or the Koch brothers or the widget manufacturer. It doesn't matter who it is. So even though we disagree on some issues, I do think he would rebuild our economy. I do think he'd rebuild our military. And I think for the first time, we'd have a foreign policy that puts America first as opposed to a foreign policy that seems to put America last. I also think he has a high probability of being the next president. One of my concerns, in all honesty, is he now has Secret Service protection by order of the president. That doesn't make you safer. In my opinion, that makes you less safe. Having written a book on the Kennedy assassination, there is no question, and I myself have been involved in at least 13 trips with the President of the United States. Let me be very clear. The manual states it. If the president drives between tall buildings on either side of the street, those buildings are supposed to be evacuated and sealed. They weren't in Dallas. There's supposed to be two agents, one at either rear axle of the car if the car drops below 20 miles an hour. JFK's car came to a full standstill, but those agents weren't in place. There's supposed to be agents throughout the crowd. There were no agents in Dealey Plaza other than those who were actually in the motorcade. So all of these Secret Service requirements that are based on their manual of conduct were violated in Dallas. They could not have been violated without the orders at the highest level of the U.S. Secret Service, which is why when the new president, Lyndon Johnson, flies from Dallas to Andrews Air Force Base and they roll up the staircase to Air Force One, who is the first man to bound up the steps and get a giant bear hug from the new president? Why, that would be Secret Service Director James Rowley, a man who got his first job in politics from Senator Lyndon Baines Johnson.
When you say that Trump, backing up a little bit, Trump can't be bought, I had that same thought, which is probably true. But what would you say right now? You know, all of Congress and the Senate, are they completely bought, compromised, blackmailed and controlled? Is it 100%?
Entirely.
It's 100%.
Look, notice the recent prosecution of former Speaker Denny Hassert. Denny Hassert has been out of public office and without any real public influence now for a good 12 years. And now suddenly the government comes back and they prosecute him for taking his own money and using it, based on what we've been told, to pay off victims of sexual assault 40, 50 years ago. They were making an example out of Denny Hassert for a reason. I think he was made an example of for those who are currently in Congress to demonstrate the system's ability to destroy you if you don't do what you're told.
Let's move into Hillary Clinton and Muammar Gaddafi and how information in the Washington Times suggests that she says that Gaddafi was planning genocidal attacks against domestic enemies. And also she kind of, in a video I saw, laughing about his death. What do you know about Gaddafi, Clinton, or just Gaddafi in general, Roger?
Well, here's what I know. Qatar, the nation, wanted Gaddafi toppled. They paid Bill Clinton $1.5 million for a speech. They paid Hillary $1.5 million for a speech. They donated $2.5 million to the Clinton Foundation. And as a result, the Clinton State Department had a complete change in position, and they toppled Gaddafi. They went to the national credit card to borrow the money to pay for the bombers that took Gaddafi down. The rebels could not have toppled Gaddafi without U.S. air support. Now, the net result of that, of course, is that Gaddafi had built the most cosmopolitan society in the African continent. Women were well treated. Women could go to school, to college, drive a car, be educated, choose their own husband. Women in Libya have been put back 200 years. They're now under Sharia law. None of those things are legal anymore. Thank you, Hillary Clinton, advocate for women.
Everybody, what most people know about Gaddafi is what the mainstream media has told us. And like everything else, it's a complete and total lie. I mentioned off air to Roger, about the Great Man-Made River. Most of you have never heard of it, and it's almost completely wiped off the internet, where Gaddafi had built a watering system from a huge underground ocean of pristine water, and was going to feed all of Africa when the United States went in there and blew it up after 40 years of construction with depleted uranium. I would say this is probably the largest crime against humanity that we know of, but no one even knows of it. And I encourage people to watch the documentary, which I have on my website, Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole, under the Gaddafi page. It tells you a little bit about the Man-Made River, and at the bottom of the page is the documentary. Roger says he's going to watch it, and it is amazing. And you know, we're lied to about everything, and that's the world we live in.
Roger, you mentioned earlier that if you had to vote today, that you would be voting for Trump. Let's talk about who you think would win if the election were held today, not really who you would vote for. Would it be Hillary?
It would be very close and competitive. What's interesting to me as a student of politics and someone who's a veteran of 9 national presidential campaigns, if you study the polls, and I'm not talking about the online polls in which you can vote multiple times and you just keep hitting refresh and voting again and hitting refresh and voting again. There's a lot of that. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about polls. But if you look at the scientific polls that have a truly representative sample, a balanced sample, Trump is getting a disproportionately higher number of blue-collar votes, union votes, and black votes than either, for example, Mitt Romney or John McCain was ever able to achieve. I think Trump has the potential to cut into some of those traditional Democratic voting groups. I also think he has an ability to bring a lot of people who've given up on politics, who don't vote, because they correctly believe that all candidates are exactly the same. They're all full of bull. Nothing will really change. Voting's a waste of my time because nothing will really change. I think Trump brings a lot of those people, and there are millions of them, by the way, into the process. So I think an election between he and Hillary would be very hard fought and very dirty. But Hillary Clinton's 2 greatest vulnerabilities are absolutely clear. One is her abuse of women. Any woman who reads my book, any woman who listens to the women who have been abused by Bill and then psychologically abused by Hillary will not vote for her. And then there's the $2 billion financial scandal at the Clinton Foundation, which is just about bribery.
One quick question, because we're coming towards the end of our last segment here. You know, being the guy that thinks everything is fake, I don't trust our paperless voting system now. It's electronic ballots. It's been proven that it's been tampered. You can flip votes. Do you actually believe that the people's votes will select the president, or are they just going to, manipulate the race and flip the votes to where they want them?
It's a very good question. I am concerned about computerized voting. I'd like to go back to paper ballots, because they're much harder to steal and they're much easier to count, and it's much harder to make ballots disappear. In the 2000 presidential recount in Florida, in which I regret to say I represented George W. Bush, perhaps the greatest mistake of my entire political career, for which I will probably burn in hell. But it was much easier to deal with paper ballots and a paper trail off the machines. Richard Charnin, who's a good friend of mine, a great author, written several good books about how the computerized voting system has been used to corrupt elections, specifically in Ohio and Wisconsin and other states. It's a very legitimate question.
Do you speak of Chelsea Clinton, speaking of women, in your book, The Clintons' War on Women?
Yeah, she's very much like her mother, meaning she's very greedy. She is very abusive. First of all, she's not a child. Let's be clear. She's a 35-year-old woman. She's a co-conspirator in the thievery going on at the Clinton Foundation. She says, and I quote, "I don't care about money. I tried to see if I could care about money, but I can't." Well, if I lived in a $10.5 million apartment, or had a $3.3 million wedding, or got $600,000 for NBC for absolutely nothing as a consultant, I guess I wouldn't care about money either. She is, according to the New York Post, abusive, short-tempered, nasty, hard to work for, and very, very entitled. I also make the case in my book, she is not Bill Clinton's biological daughter. She is the daughter of Webster Hubbell, who is Hillary's lover, law partner, and later Deputy Attorney General, largely responsible for the Waco conflagration.
Well, if she is indeed Bill Clinton's daughter, though, that means that she is the daughter of a sociopath and a serial rapist. So, either way, you will lose when it comes to her.
But if she is the daughter of Webster Hubbell, and she's married, therefore, to the son of Congressman Ed Mesvinsky, would mean both her father and her father-in-law went to federal prison for corruption.
We're coming to the end of the show here. Tell everybody where to get your books, what to get, and who to give them to.
Sure. You can go to rogerstone.com, no D, ROGERSTONA, rogerstone.com. You can go to amazon.com. You can go to the local Barnes & Noble. You can go to Books A Million. You can go to Clinton's War, one word, clintonswar.com. Or you can go to bushcrimes.com, and the books are all available there. If you make the New York Times bestseller list, it's much tougher for the mainstream media to ignore you. So, folks, go out and give these books away for Christmas. Help me make the list.
All right, it's Roger Stone, and that's David Weiss. I'm Patricia Steere, and you've been listening to Truth is Stranger Than Lies on Talk Network.
Truly connected.
So it's only 63, so that's okay then.
Well, we could talk about specifics. I think the most obvious one is this fellow, Jerry Parks. Jerry Parks was hired as a private investigator. His job was to keep a thumb on numerous women who could be problems in Clinton's comeback campaign for governor. Clinton won. Parks presented his bill for $83,000. Bill Clinton laughed at him and said, well, the election's over, Jerry. I won. You're not getting paid. Jerry therefore threatened to go public with a lot of things he knew about Bill and women and drugs. And about 3 miles from his home, somebody drove Jerry off the side of the road and put 3 slugs in his head.
Suicide.
So motive means opportunity. Do I have proof? No, I have no proof.
Right.
But who else logically wanted Jerry Parks dead?
With your book, The Clinton's War on Women, many people have through the years heard about Bill Clinton and his womanizing ways and heard him lie straight to the American public. But Hillary, you find her complicit in all of this as well, not just in looking the other way, but blatantly covering things up. Tell us a little bit more about Hillary Clinton and how much danger are we in that she's going to be our president?
Well, first of all, I want to make a very specific distinction between consensual sex and sexual assault. My book is not about Bill's affairs, mistresses, girlfriends, conquests, one-night stands. If I wrote such a book, it would have to be an encyclopedia. Literally, I think it would number in the thousands because Bill Clinton is a sex addict, and this is why former President Gerald Ford told him to his face that he needed psychiatric help for that problem. My book is about something far darker, and that is a serial trail of sexual assault and rape. Juanita Broaddrick, Kathleen Willey, Paula Corbin Jones are the best known of these, but Sandra Allen James, Liz Ward Grayson, Becky Brown, Helen Dowdy, Eileen Wellstone. This list goes on and on and on. And yes, not only has Bill perpetrated these crimes against women, either sexual assault and exposing himself, demanding oral sex, or in the case of Broaddrick and Grayson and others, outright rape, but Hillary Clinton has been the point person for the cover-up. It has been Hillary who first, from her East Wing office, has sought to discredit and degrade and assault these women, bimbos, sluts, whores, trash, as if it's their fault that they got sexually assaulted by her husband. And then it's also Hillary who has hired the heavy-handed private detectives, Jack Palladino, Anthony Pellicano, Ivan Duda, Jerry Parks, to keep tabs on those women who would be problematic for the Clintons if they came forward and talked about what Bill had done. So she's a full partner in the cover-up. She's the one who's directed the veritable terror campaign to silence Bill's victims unless they get in the way of their reach for power and wealth and elective office.
Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton, if either of them are who's running against each other, it's pretty much the exact same crime family in the end who's going to win. But do you think that we need to worry about or consider that Hillary may be our future president?
It's certainly a legitimate concern. Look, a Hillary Clinton-Jeb Bush election would be a heads I win, tails you lose election. Their policies are identical. Endless war, erosion of our civil liberties, massive borrowing and debt being passed on to our great-grandchildren now, incredible increases in federal spending, a foreign policy that has systematically turned over every country in the Middle East to our enemies. They are exactly the same in every way. This is really why I was once a very proud and sentimental Republican, an aide to 3 Republican presidents. I'm a former young Republican national chairman. You know, I love the old Republican Party of Barry Goldwater, the party of small government, stay out of my bedroom, stay out of my business, stay out of my life. That Republican Party doesn't exist anymore. Both parties have morphed into one party. It's the endless war party. It is very sad, but although the Mitt Romneys and the Barack Obamas endeavor to try to sound different, it's a kabuki dance. It's all false. The policies remain exactly the same. Remember, Barack Obama was going to close Guantanamo, still open. He was going to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. Now we're talking about sending troops to Syria. Nothing ever really changes. Hillary Clinton is at this point probably the favorite to become president of the United States. But I would argue that because her campaign strategy is solely built on winning a disproportionate number of votes from women, when women learn that she is an abuser of women, that while her husband has abused them physically, Hillary has abused them psychologically, I think the bottom falls out of that strategy, and therefore she has built her entire campaign structure on quicksand.
I mean, do you think the American people have the mental capacity?
Central Intelligence Agency, the mob, Big Texas Oil, they all played their part. They were all involved. Johnson is the one indispensable party. So when I wrote that book, I kind of expected an enormous amount of blowback from the Johnson retainers and the Johnson family lawyers and some of his political aficionados. And you know what I got? Crickets. Most of those people are dead. Now, taking on Bill and Hillary Clinton and the Bush dynasty, as I have in my current book, The Clintons' War on Women, which is an unvarnished, sordid, true story of serial sexual assault and rape, intimidation, cover-up, witness tampering, physical violence against witnesses, drugs, both drug use and drug trafficking, lies, cover-up. Yes, I have had some death threats. Yes, I have worn a vest, a bulletproof vest, to some of my book signings. On the other hand, I kind of believe that the higher my profile is, the better off it is for me. So let me say it just right now. In a few weeks, if they tell you I was depressed and I committed suicide, or if they tell you I was killed in a tragic hunting accident, or if I got hit by a bus crossing the street, it's all a lie. I was murdered, and Hillary Clinton is the chief suspect.
Wow. So the Clinton death list, if anyone looks that up, you give that total validity?
Well, you know, I think there's some overstatement there. There is at least one website that claims that the Clintons are responsible for up to 83 individual deaths with the goal of covering their trail of crimes. I can't find any more than 63
Just
of
63.
the 83 that they are.
You know, people seldom go to the trouble of scratching the surface of things to find the inner truth.
You're here because you know something, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
Truth is stranger than lies. From deep inside the rabbit hole, here's your host, David Weiss.
And I'm Patricia Steere. Welcome to Truth is Stranger Than Lies. David, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. We have a special guest with us.
Yes, his newest book is The War on Women. He is, among many things, a lobbyist, a staffer in the Senate and House. He's got other books on the Clinton and Bush crime families, and he is a former advisor to current presidential candidate Donald Trump, who did not fire him. There's more to the story than maybe you have read. Let's welcome Roger Stone. Roger, thank you for being here on Truth is Stranger Than Lies.
I am delighted to be with you.
Roger, we're going to get into some amazing stuff. I had the privilege of listening in on an interview earlier today, and some of the stuff that you're talking about is simply mind-blowing, and if you're not sitting down and you're hearing it for the first time, you will be sitting down. But I have one question I want to jump forward and just ask you. How are you still alive?
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? I actually think that there's very little danger in writing about the Kennedy and Johnson error. I wrote a New York Times best-selling book, which makes the case, I think a compelling case, using fingerprint evidence, eyewitness evidence, deep Texas politics, to make the case that Lyndon Baines Johnson was the linchpin of a plot to murder John Kennedy. He was certainly the single greatest beneficiary of that crime. And while I absolutely guarantee you that the